My name is Natalie King. I am at the Biodiversity Learning Center, and we are going to interview David Laurencio on the Upland chorus frog.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend of mine. I never understood a single word he said, but I helped him a drink.
My name is David Laurencio. I am a collections manager here at the Auburn University Museum of Natural History. I work with tetrapods, which are vertebrates that are limbed, so all the vertebrates outside of fishes. But I primarily work with amphibians and reptiles. So the upland chorus frog is one of our common frogs here, and they're one of our early callers. So they'll call starting in January, sometimes even late December, and they're pretty much done here in March. So the upland chorus frog is a fairly small frog, about an inch in length when it's an adult. And you can tell these guys, you can tell that they're upland chorus frogs by the three stripes along their back. So these used to be in the Pseudacris triceriata group, triceriata referring to the three stripes along the back. That's a wide-ranging group throughout the U.S., which was split into various species. And so Ferriarum is what we have here in this area, but you can still see those three stripes along the back. And if you have a nice specimen, you'll be able to see them. Sometimes the stripes are broken up. Sometimes they get a little blotchy. The other breed in ephemeral pools or temporary pools, which is very important to the species. So you won't find them, say, in a pond. Ponds have fish, they have predators, and these predators will basically eat the eggs and eat the tadpoles. So the species doesn't do well with fish predation. So what they do is they'll wait for the forest to flood and low areas to gather water. And once those pools establish, the frogs will come in and call from there. And it's a great strategy for the species because then you're avoiding the predation. So you'll hear them from these really kind of low water areas calling. The males call, and the males call to attract the females. The females will choose their male of their liking and hop up to it, and then the male will basically jump on her back and give her a little hug. We call that amplexus. Once the frogs are in amplexus, the female will go into the water and lay her eggs. Generally several dozen eggs, and she'll attach them to vegetation under the water. If you're out the right time of year, if you look closely, you'll see kind of sticks and grassy things under the water, and sometimes you'll see a little cluster of jelly-like eggs attached to it, and that would be the eggs of Ferriarum. Their life cycle past that is your kind of standard frog. From those eggs, tadpoles emerge, and then those tadpoles eventually will metamorph into little tiny froglets that will come out of the water before those temporary pools dry up. So Ferriarum, so the upland chorus frog is in the group of chorus frogs, which is in the larger group of tree frogs. So tree frogs are one of our frog groups that we have here in the southeast, and they're found throughout the world. But tree frogs are identified by their big toe pads. The true tree frogs can actually climb up your windows and climb up walls with those toe pads. Pseudacris, the chorus frogs tend to be more terrestrial than the tree frogs are. The tree frogs like the trees, the pseudacris kind of like the ground. So they have expanded toe pads, but not really the big, nice, sticky toe pads that the tree frogs do. But, so generally, amphibians are important because they're indicator species. And what this means is they are, as it sounds, an indicator of the ecosystem health. Amphibians have a smooth, moist skin that is very permeable. And what that means is that things can come in, things can go out, right? So they can actually get water through their skin. They can lose water through their skin. That's why we have amphibians tied so closely to wetlands. If you ever have a frog in your house, you're more likely than not to find it dried up and dead, unfortunately. And that's because the air conditioning sucks, literally, will suck the water off the frog. But they can also get oxygen through their skin, and they can get chemicals through their skin. So any kind of pollutants in the environment will affect these species immediately. And so anywhere you have a good population of amphibians in general, you have a healthy ecosystem. Other roles, they provide food. There's lots of chorus frogs in the world. If you can think of it, they're kind of like the popcorn out there for a lot of things that need to eat. Tadpoles, right? There's lots of eggs in tadpoles that also feed lots of aquatic things. And then they also eat. They're bug eaters, right? So they help control pest populations along with other amphibians. These frogs, and really the easiest way of telling these frogs apart is by their call. Their call is very distinctive. If you are out at night in January or February, you'll probably hear it. It sounds like a thumb running across a comb. So if you ever hear like a out in the woods where there's some ephemeral water, that'll be these guys. Generally at that time of year, there's only this species calling, and then the spring peepers, and the peepers peep. So they're fairly easy to tell apart. This is quite the opposite. I like this frog because you can hear it just about anywhere. If you're driving around at night, on a rainy night in January and February, with your windows rolled down, you can pass a little depression and suddenly hear these guys calling off from the corner. Yeah. So they call in choruses. They're pretty persistent. I've seen these guys call in super cold weather. We've been out in 32-degree weather, and the males were in the water calling away. I don't know if any of the females were active. They might have just been in bed sleeping. But the males will call when they get juiced up. One of the neat things about the chorus frog group is their calls are all basically the same pattern. If you look at the sonogram, kind of the shape of their call. These sound, if you get one of these old plastic combs and run your thumb down, their call sounds just like that. The work that I do here has more to do with their call than the frog themselves. So we have about 8 years now of frog call recording. So we have automated recording devices, or what we call frog loggers, out in the forest. And these loggers record what's calling throughout the night, and now they record throughout the day as well. But the idea there is that we're collecting data to see when throughout the year these frogs call for various species, but then also when throughout the night these frogs call, and how calls differ between species, and then also over time, right? As we gain a longer and longer time series of calls, we can look for changes. As our climate changes, if we get warmer, our winters might get shorter, our springs and summers might get longer. And a lot of species of frogs, their calling is based on rainfall and temperature. And as those variables change, we might actually have a change in their reproductive season with unknown effects, right? This can mean that things in the south might start moving northward. But here, what we can look at with the frog loggers is, are these guys calling earlier in the year? If it starts warming up earlier, are these guys shifting their calling to earlier in the year? And so that's kind of one of the projects we're looking at here. We also work with FrogWatch USA, which is a national program, a citizen science program that looks at frog call phonology, when frogs are calling. And this is basically, we have a chapter here at the museum where we do workshops and train volunteers to basically go out to a pond, a wetland, and listen and then record what they hear. They send that data into the national database, which is now in their 20th year. So we now have 20 years of data on that program, which is an amazing data set with tens of thousands of data points, which can now look on a national level at changes in when different species of frogs are calling. That's, those are data sets that would be impossible without the help of thousands of volunteers. We had a fun experience with this species also a few years ago. Folks out of the lab out of Florida State came up looking at speciation actually in different pseudacarus species. So we had researchers here that needed amplectic pairs to use for their research, where they'd get an amplectic pair and then put the female in a test arena and play two different calls, and then gauge her reaction. So we had a fun time getting a lot of undergraduates and grad students out there and just going out and collecting frogs for them for that project. And that was a lot of fun.